How I got in sales. Most people don't know that I started out as an engineer. So my background is I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. And I would work for different companies during the summer. So one of the companies I worked for was Honeywell. The first job I got during my summer internship was working on the Mach 46, Mach 50 torpedo system, where I wrote some software. And I'll talk about that later, but it was interesting because that was my introduction to, software writing, learning how to work with programming and stuff like that. And from there, I remember I graduated from college, and I went to work for the Electronic Test Center, where I actually started writing some more software programming, testing, circuit boards, just making sure the components didn't fail that actually went into the munitions. In other words, the stuff that creates a lot of havoc in the military. So I tested a lot of components for the military, and then also did environmental testing. So I worked on the electrical side, the environmental side. For those of you who don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Technical people, you know what I'm talking about. And then from there, I said, I don't really like programming. I really don't like doing the actual circuit board testing of products and writing software for them. So I then moved on to another company called E.F. Johnson. E.F. Johnson was a wireless company. I was selling wireless systems in the 400, 500 megahertz, what is known as trunking systems. And if you see a cop, you do the push-to-talk, that's a trunking system. And so that was my first introduction into the wireless space, telecommunications, and I was an application engineer, which means I wasn't doing so much of the programming, but this time I had to design sites. And so I was designing these 800 megahertz sites for trunking systems for large public safety companies. And how I got into sales was the following. I designed a system. I remember competing against Motorola at the time. It was us against Motorola, right? And so I was given this project, and so I was supposed to design the system. It was quite an elaborate system. It had 100 sites, more or less, and I was supposed to pick the most efficient sites and design a wireless system that would actually cover a geographical space for, I think it was Iowa Power and Gas or something like that. Don't remember the name exactly. But I remember I worked on that project for about a month. I locked myself in a room, and I remember, I was printing up all these charts because, when you're working with a wireless system, you now have to figure out, how high the tower is, to take that into consideration, how powerful the antennas have to be, and given the different terrains, what type of coverage are you going to get. And so I had 100 towers to work with, and they said you have to narrow it down and optimize the number of towers. So I think my final number that I came down to after analyzing over 100 towers, doing all kinds of massive energy plots to see how the actual wavelengths were going to travel and, the type of coverage we were going to get. And I remember I worked again for a whole month doing that, and I guess we came down to like 26 sites. I don't remember what the number was specifically. But then it was time to go down and do the presentation, the dog and pony. So I remember traveling down with the salesman. His name was Ken. And I remember we did the presentation. Presentation went exceptionally well. I remember Motorola was there, and it was, quite intimidating. If you know Motorola, it's a great company. And quite intimidating. I mean, it was only me and the sales guy there, and they walked in with like 9 bodies to do the presentation. So we did our presentation. They did their presentation. Things went well. A month after evaluation, they said, can you come down and do one more presentation? We have some technical questions on the specifications for the actual site. Sure, went down there. Did the presentation, answered all the technical questions with regard to the wireless system we were trying to bid to them. And about, a month or two later, I'm just guessing at the time frame at this point, we won the bid. We actually won. We actually beat out Motorola. And so I was like, yeah, it was my first big system win as an application engineer, so I was kind of happy about that. And I remember Ken was like, just excited, came over to the booth, where I was in my cubicle to tell me, hey, Victor, we won. I'm like, yeah, let's go celebrate, he says. So I remember we went out to a real nice lunch, and we had a great time, talked about the system, you're kind of high-fiving each other, patting yourselves on the back, hey, we did it type of thing, right? And I was okay with that. And then I remember I had a moment where, I was talking to one of the other engineers, and I was telling him how happy I was that we won this site. He said, Victor, you realize that the system you bid over the next 2-3 years will be about $5 million in terms of revenue for the company. I'm like, wow. He said, did you stop to think about how much the sales guy, Ken, is going to get paid in commissions? I said, no. I was so excited about just winning the bid. I never really thought about that. I wasn't thinking that way. He says, well, conservatively, he's going to get somewhere in the neighborhood, I don't know, maybe $50,000 to $100,000 in bonuses. I said, what? $50,000 to $100,000 in bonuses just on the first or second phase of the actual project? He says, yeah. I said, are you kidding me? Now, at that time, my base salary was somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, so I'm thinking this guy's going to get my base salary in one foul swoop. And guess who put in all the work? I did. That at least was my thinking, right? Because as an engineer, we're always like, those damn salespeople, they don't do anything, right? And we, the engineers, have to design everything. That's kind of my mindset. Later on, when I went into sales, I kind of changed my mindset. I realized that salespeople do a lot of work and actually bring the opportunities to companies. But at that moment, I was like, I need to be in sales. If I'm going to put the work out there, put in the work, design the systems and all this, I should try and get a little compensation here. So that was the beginning of how I got into sales. So to this day, I thank Ken for kind of, instigating that by getting a big commission check, because the way I calculate it is we won that big system sale and I got a $50 lunch and he got a $50,000 commission check. And that was kind of the beginning of maybe I should go into sales.